Welcome to Teaching Truth. Alan Bates worked as a sub-postmaster in a post office in Llandudno. And although he was never convicted of theft, Alan Bates was dismissed from his job after raising concerns about the Horizon computer system. For 20 years, Alan Bates, played by Toby Jones in the recent ITV drama Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, has campaigned for people to hear about the truth of what happened during what was one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history, the Post Office scandal. Since 1999, more than 700 sub-postmasters have been wrongly prosecuted for theft, false accounting and fraud because of a faulty accounting system called Horizon, with postmasters asked to hand over their own money to cover and to make up for the discrepancies. It wasn't until 2019 that the Post Office first acknowledged the problem with the Horizon system and prosecutions began to be overturned. Alan Bates has said that the fight, quote, isn't over yet, and the campaigners' priority is to get money for the real victims. They have destroyed thousands of lives and families. They have ruined so many people. They have tarred the reputation of hundreds. They've got away with it. We have to bring them to account. We're not going away, said Alan Bates. None of us are going away on this. We're all going to keep fighting until it happens. It is often said that adversity brings out the true worth of people. Well, that is certainly true of Alan Bates and the many other campaigners who have not been afraid to stand up to the institution that is the Post Office, to stand up and be counted for the truth and for what is right. And what was true of Alan Bates and what is true of Alan Bates and the many other campaigners was also true of the church at Smyrna, the church that we're going to look at in our reflections this week, a church which faced much adversity, a church who were rich and yet a church who were not afraid to stand up for what was right, to stand up for the truth, and to stand up and be counted for their faith. Now, by way of painting, as it were, the setting for you, the church in Smyrna was an oppressed church, but it was a healthy church. If you were travelling from the Isle of Patmos, where we know John was writing the Revelation, Smyrna was about 40 miles up the coast from Ephesus. The next stop, as it were, for the postman on his route after he had visited Ephesus. And Smyrna was a bit like Ephesus in that it was a large yet more affluent port city. And like Ephesus, it was very proud of its reputation as a city where worship of the Roman emperors was done with much devotion. Now, what that meant was this, that if you were a Christian, a follower of Jesus, and refused to worship the emperor, the Roman emperor, or refused to call Caesar Lord, you'd be persecuted for your allegiance to Jesus Christ. And working in tandem against the church with the Roman Empire in Smyrna was a large population of Jews who hated Christians. Why? Because they saw them as a cult. And as you read in the book of Acts, the Jews living in these largely Gentile cities were often the agitators as well as the instigators of the persecution against the Christians. And this was happening in Smyrna. Smyrna, therefore, was not a comfortable place to live as a Christian. Believers were prohibited from being employed in some of the best jobs, and that meant that by default, a number of them lived in very real financial poverty. It was costly to be a follower of Jesus in Smyrna. And Jesus here is warning the church at Smyrna that a new wave of persecution is coming. And therefore this letter is written to strengthen the church at Smyrna and to reassure the people in the face of trial. Let me just say this against the backdrop of the reality of what was happening at Smyrna. That persecution and suffering for the sake of Jesus Christ is part of the DNA of being a Christian. The early church did not know anything about a false prosperity gospel where Jesus' job was to keep them healthy, wealthy, and comfortable. That was not the gospel or the reality then, and that is not the reality and the gospel now. The church that was the church in Smyrna was in modern-day Turkey, the city of Izmir, founded by the Greeks and taken over by the Romans. The word Smyrna means myrrh. And myrrh, as well as being one of the gifts the wise men brought when they came to worship Jesus, was an ingredient of the anointing oil in Exodus 30 for the priests and is mentioned in Psalm 45. Myrrh surrounds the beloved as he comes for his bride and is using the preparation of Jesus' body for burial. All these references to myrrh are present here as the speaker, the beloved, Jesus, is speaking to his bride, the church at Smyrna. The fragrance of myrrh, as it were, was released in this church when the bottle was smashed, as it were, by trials and by adversity. Do you see the connection and the significance? Smyrna, myrrh, adversity, and the fragrance of myrrh being released. The setting of the church at Smyrna. It was a difficult church to be a part of. It was a church which faced persecution. That's the reality of the church at Smyrna. And if anyone ever taught you that being a follower of Jesus Christ would be easy and without problems, we only need to look at the reality of that church in Smyrna. Join me tomorrow in Teaching Truth as we look at the situation of the church in Smyrna.